Hi, everyone. This video is for our first graders. I thought we would review a lesson that we did, I think it was back in January, about finishing your work, which is kind of an important concept to remember right now because we're all at home and our teacher isn't there to check on what we're doing. And so we kind of have to be responsible and finish our work kind of on our own. It's a little tricky. It's a little tricky to do. So I thought we could review the story in here. Here, let's have a look here. Let's make a plan. First thing I want to do is I want to review the signs that we've been practicing. Here's that picture. So we're going to review those signs that we've learned. And we're going to talk about the skills associated with finishing your work. What are the things that we need to remember when we finish our work? We're going to read a story in here. And then actually we're going to read that bounced out. We're going to read another story. It doesn't want to stay in there. We're going to read two stories. We're going to read one story in here about room 14, Mrs. Sawani's class. And then I have another story about another little girl who worked really hard to finish her work. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Okay, so this is a review of our sign language. So this first one is the sign for friends. Remember, so we make kind of two hooks with our fingers and we click them together like this, friends. And a lot of the things that we learn in these lessons help us to be good friends. Responsible, remember? We put our two hands on our shoulder just like that. Responsible. School. Oh, does anybody miss school yet? School. All right, and these are the skills that we have to think about when we think about finishing our work. We have to ask ourselves, did I finish my work on time? Usually when we're at school, and maybe even when you're at home, you have a certain amount of time in which you need to finish your work. So did I get my work done in that time? Okay. Did I check my work? This is a hard thing because we're at home and our teacher isn't there to check things for us. So it's helpful if we go back and we look at our work and we check our answers and see if they still make sense. So you do them all and then you go back and look again and say, does that still seem right to me? Then you have to ask yourself, did I hand it in? What a tricky thing to do right now because we can't hand these things in to our teachers. But maybe your teachers ask you to take a picture of it and send it. Maybe it's something you're doing on the internet and so your teacher can see it right away. So that's something that is very different while we're learning at home, when we're doing our schoolwork at home. How we hand things in is very different than it is when we're at school. And then if you've done those things, if you've finished your work on time and you checked it and you did your best to hand it in, then you can tell yourself, great, I did a great job. Okay, so let's read our story. It's called Finishing Your Work. And then we'll read that other story that I was telling you about as well. Maria sighed as she worked on another math problem. The other students were having recess and the classroom was quiet. Maria felt alone. Although Mrs. Sawani was also working in the room, Maria thought, why was Mrs. Sawani being so mean this morning? Finishing work, phooey, thought Maria. It sure was boring working while everyone else was outside playing. She wanted to be with her friends. Why couldn't Mrs. Sawani let her finish her math after recess? She thought about asking her teacher that question. Then she remembered Mrs. Sawani's words. You may go to recess when you finish your work. Why am I having so much trouble getting finished today? I'm good at math, thought Maria. Maria had to admit there was another problem. She could do the math. She just couldn't seem to get started. First, she had lost her pencil, and when she finally found it, she had to sharpen it. Then Maria had stopped by Mrs. Sawani's desk to show her the fancy eraser on her pencil. After she'd finished the first problem, Maria had noticed a mistake. When she'd erased the numbers, Maria made a hole in her worksheet. She had to go ask for another one. By the time Maria had started working again, Mrs. Sawani had said, it's time for recess. Check your math papers and hand them in. And she had barely gotten started. So that's our story. So let's look at those skills again. Ask yourself, did I finish my work on time? So in our story, did Maria finish her work on time? She didn't. She did not. She got distracted. It says, why didn't Maria finish her work on time? Remember, she had to get a pencil and she had to sharpen it, and then it had that neat eraser on it, and she wanted to show Mrs. Sawani, and then she started her work and she erased and she ripped her paper. I feel like all of these things are things that I feel like I've done before. It's easy to get distracted when we're supposed to be finishing our work. Then you have to ask yourself, did I check my work? And what does it mean to check your work? We talked about that at the beginning, right? You go back, once you've finished everything, you go back and look at it again and say, is that still the right answer? Do I still agree? Ask yourself, did I hand it in? And we said, it's so tricky, right? At school, we know just where we're supposed to put our papers when we finished our work, but at home, it's very different. So you just have to do your best in that part. And the last part is if you've done your work and you checked it and you did your best to hand it in, tell yourself, great, I did it. Okay, friends, the next thing I want to do is read a story with you called The Most Magnificent Thing. Now, if you're some of my Foundations friends, we read this story when we talked about finishing our work before. And it's about a little girl who's trying to make a magnificent thing. And that's a big word, magnificent. And we've talked a lot about synonyms. So some synonyms for magnificent are really neat, stupendous, amazing, fantastic. So this is a story about a girl who's trying to make the most magnificent thing, the most amazing thing, the coolest thing. Those are all synonyms. So we're going to read that story and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about it.
The Most Magnificent Thing by Ashley Spires. This is a regular girl and her best friend in the whole wide world. They do all kinds of things together. They race, they eat, they explore, they relax. She makes things, he unmakes things. One day the girl has a wonderful idea. She is going to make the most magnificent thing. She knows just how it will look. She knows just how it will work. All she has to do is make it, and she makes things all the time. Easy peasy. First, she hires an assistant. Next, they gather their supplies. They set up somewhere out of the way and get to work. The girl tinkers and hammers and measures, while her assistant pounces and growls and chews. When she is finished, she steps back to admire her work. She walks around one side. Her assistant examines the other side. It doesn't look right. Her assistant picks it up and gives it a shake. It doesn't feel right either. They are shocked to discover that the thing isn't magnificent or good. It isn't even sort of okay. It's all wrong. The girl tosses it aside and gives it another go. She smooths and wrenches and fiddles. Her assistant circles and tugs and wags. When she is finished, she stands up and takes a long look at it. Her assistant gives it a nudge with his paw. The thing is still wrong. She decides to try again. The girl saws and glues and adjusts. She stands and examines and stares. She twists and fastens and tweaks. She fixes and straightens and studies. She tries all different ways to make it better. She makes it square. She makes it round. She gives it legs. She gives it antennae. She makes it fuzzy. She makes it long, short, rough, smooth, big, small. One even smells of stinky cheese, but none of them are magnificent. Her hard work attracts a few admirers, but they don't understand. They can't see the magnificent thing that she has in her mind. She gets mad. The angrier she gets, the faster she works. She smashes pieces into shapes. She jams parts together. She pummels the little bits in. Her hands feel too big to work, and her brain is too full of all the not right things. If only the thing would just work. Crunch. The pain starts in her finger. It rushes up to her brain, and she explodes. It is not her finest moment. I'm no good at this. I quit. Her assistant suggests a walk. It's not much help at first, but before long she starts to feel different. Bit by bit, the mad gets pushed out of her head. As they stroll along, she comes across the first wrong thing she made. The bad feelings are about to start all over again. Then she notices something surprising. There are some parts of the wrong thing that are really quite right. The bolts on one, the shape of another, the wheel-to-seat ratio of the next. There are all sorts of parts that she likes. By the time she reaches the end of the trail, she finally knows how to make the thing magnificent. She gets to work. She works carefully and slowly, tinkering, hammering, twisting, fiddling, gluing, painting. Her assistant makes sure there are no distractions. Afternoon fades to evening. And finally, she finishes. She alerts her assistant. The pair take a good look. It leans a little bit to the left, and it's a bit heavier than expected. The color could use a bit of work too, but it's just what she wanted. They climb aboard and take it for a spin. They are not disappointed. It really is the most magnificent thing.
What did you guys think of that story? Wasn't that neat? I think there's a lot of things that feel the same as when we're trying to do our schoolwork, right? She knew what she needed to do, but she had a hard time doing it, and sometimes she didn't have the things that she needed, but she kept working hard, and at the end she ended up with something really neat. And not only that, but sometimes it's just doing our math work and we don't end up with something really neat like a scooter for our dog at the end of the story. But we do end up finishing our work, and sometimes that can just make us feel proud, right? We can feel proud for the work that we've done. So what I want you to do right now is think of a time that you finished something and you felt proud about it. Now, when we talked about this with my first graders, some of the things that they thought of were cleaning their rooms. They talked about how their mom asked them to clean their room, and then when they finished, they looked around and they thought, this looks really nice. I feel very proud of myself, right? And another friend talked about learning to ride a bike and how proud she felt of herself when she finished learning how to ride a bike. So sometimes we don't have a thing to hold in our hands when we finished our work. Sometimes we just have a good feeling. So I'd like you guys to think about a time that you've finished something and how did you feel? And if you haven't, try today to finish something, to finish your work, to accomplish something, and see how you feel about it.